and welcome back to the Down to the Wire podcast. We're back again. We're talking about Formula 1 again. I feel like it's been... Has it been that long? I don't know if it has. It feels like it's been a while because of all of the football.
We missed a race.
Sorry?
We missed one race in terms of podcasts. But
one race. Wow. That's not too bad, to be fair. Not too bad. We've had a lot of sport to talk about. Jack, how you doing?
I'm doing alright, to be fair. The Formula 1 wasn't as interesting as it could have been, which we'll go on to talk about. And we also know the Euros. So it shouldn't be a great atmosphere for me, but I'm feeling good, I am.
Well, yeah, I mean, this weekend, just going on a little bit of a tangent quickly. We had Formula 1, we had the Lions as well, playing their first game of the tour. And as you said, we had Wales. The Lions won, but Alan Wynne-Jones is now out of the tour because of injury, so that sucked. And then Wales lost, and it wasn't just the fact that they lost. I think it was the nature of the loss as well. So there was a lot of sport on, but afterwards I was like, oof, this feels a bit heavy, you know?
Yeah, to be fair, if I was watching the Euros a little bit more avidly, perhaps I'd be a bit more happy, because apparently the games yesterday were ecstatic.
Yes,
but,
that's true.
I wasn't actually watching them. I was watching it. Watching Tour de France, and that has been quite fun to watch, at the very least.
Okay, yeah, I saw that massive pile-up on that one.
Oh, it's been about 5 so far. Chaos.
But yeah, the France... who were they playing? France... Switzerland, that was it. That was a brilliant game. But yeah, we'll talk about football another time because we'll be doing that in the coming weeks. But for now, we'll stick with the F1. We have entered the first of a triple header. Austria twice, so Styria and Austria. And then, what's the third one in that little
Silverstone
patch?
Silverstone. We'll see the introduction of the sprint races.
Oh, how exciting. Sorry, that made me sound really weird. How exciting. Yeah. Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah. No, so it's kind of a key, obviously there's still a lot of the season to go, but it's like with most sports, Formula 1 is all about momentum, isn't it? It kind of started in Mercedes' favour for the first sort of four-ish races. Yeah. And now we've very much had a bit of a swing, which we'll come on to. But yeah, without going into details, what were your thoughts on was it Styria this weekend?
Styria was the weekend just gone. Austria was the weekend.
Yes, there we are. So what was your thoughts on Styria?
Truth be told, after the electric nature that we had in the double headers in Austria last season, this season so far has underwhelmed in terms of on-track drama. I mean, to be fair, I feel like, well, you were saying don't go into details, but I mean, so you're going to dip into a detail.
Well, yeah, of course,
I feel like a lot of the drama dissipated when a lot of the sort of the drivers which the cameras would be focused on because they're in the top half of the grid, but they all seem to have, Gasly instantly retired, Leclerc got a bit of a bump, which meant that he was straight down, and then the cameras don't focus on you when you're down there until you start to take a few overtakes. So in a sense, the only drama really that the cameras was following throughout the weekend was the Verstappen, Hamilton, Bottas, Perez show, and everybody else. I mean, even the guys who didn't take contact at the beginning, they couldn't keep up, but then there was just a big gap behind them then to the next lot of guys. So there wasn't a lot of that midfield battle, which has made a lot of the races exciting so far this season. So by and large, it wasn't a great watch, if I'm honest.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't the most exhilarating. Like you said, perhaps that's been amplified by the fact that for many years the French Grand Prix has been a little bit of a dirge. This year, it was really exciting. As you said, Austria last season. I mean, the thing with Austria last season as well is that over 2 weekends we had 2 very different races between different drivers and weather as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, the prospect this time around of having another Austria that we've just had is not... I don't know, a little bit of a weird one. It'll be interesting to see what they do with the tyres. I haven't read anything about it, whether they're going to change the compounds. to mix it up a little bit.
I think they are changing them. I don't know which way, but I'm pretty sure they haven't got the same for back-to-back weekends, if I'm honest.
Yeah, that would make sense, just for a bit of variation. So I guess that is a variable in itself. But yeah, it wasn't... There just didn't... Not a lot happened, really. I mean, I guess there's a few things that we can pick up on, and I guess there was, some continuing themes, shall we say, that we've seen throughout the rest of the season that haven't really changed. But yeah, as you said, Gasly was out fairly early on. Poor old Pierre, he was just minding his own business, and then he got clattered by about 3 people.
To be fair,
so
that's got to be probably the most ironic driver of the day, because Leclerc got driver of the day, but it was 100% him for the reason that Gasly didn't finish the race. It did cause Leclerc a bit of damage because he clipped his front wing, but by and large Leclerc was the one who sort of not cut across, but was slowly veering from left to right, and then ended up clipping Gasly's tyre. And then, I haven't seen... it got deflated and it had a puncture and all that, but it just went... It was inside out by the end of it. It was like, that thing...
I think it ended up being suspension damage, I think, as well, didn't it? Because the wheel was kind of facing a different direction from the car, which is never a good sign.
No,
kind of touching on Leclerc and the Ferraris there, they had a fantastic race, given they didn't qualify particularly well. Let me see where they finished in qualifying.
Sainz qualified 12th, so he had particularly one, but Leclerc was 7th, and I think that was reflective of where that car is at. I think the natural pecking order is finding its sort of stage, and it is sort of Red Bull, Mercedes, then probably McLaren, followed by Ferrari. Gasly seems to be doing bits with the AlphaTauri, and race after race. I think they were saying he's had 5 top 6 qualifyings now this season.
Yeah, it's quite impressive, isn't it?
The
thing is
he hasn't finished very well. That's his issue.
Yes, that's true. And the thing is as well, I feel Tsunoda has kind of calmed down a little bit.
He's calmed down, but I feel like he's lost a bit of his race pace.
He's top 10.
Was he? He finished top 10.
Yeah, he finished 10th.
11th, and
yes.
I think they said they've had 5 red flags in qualifying, and he's been the cause of 3 of them, which doesn't help matters. So yeah, it's been okay, but I feel like some of that aggressive nature which he came in with is what was helping him. I think I don't want to say he's scared to do things, but he just doesn't seem to be as volatile. You want to see him going around and going, I don't care, I'm cutting people off, because that is what made him really good at the beginning. It was like he had no fear. He was if he was going to dive up the inside of someone, he's going to dive up the inside. He wasn't really that scared. But now I feel like, I'm guessing maybe someone's whispered in his ear, hey, you've had a few red flags, you've crashed out a few times, you're not doing as great as perhaps people may have put a big tag on him to do great, but he isn't doing as great as that tag suggested at the beginning. No. So it's like, why don't you actually finish a few races first before you start dive bombing people and try to set the world alight? I feel like he's I guess what you're saying in a sense is he's finishing races and he's not having the bad publicity about him, but I'd like to see him do the volatile stuff which really gets you noticed.
Well, it would give us more to talk about.
It would, yeah. If he could T-bone Hamilton at the first turn, that would be awesome in terms of just driving. Oh, here we go. But yeah, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon.
No, well, the thing with Ferrari is, I guess the wider picture is, when you consider that I don't know whether they've completely stopped development on their car, but I'm sure I read somewhere that they're not really doing much development, if any, this season.
Yeah, Toto Wolff came out and said, I think it was either after or before this first Austrian weekend, that they were going to start altering their focus towards the 2022 car with the regulations. But they have since sort of reverted and said, we will be... at first it sounded like we are just focusing on 2022. We've given up on this year. By the sounds of things, Red Bull are too good. And to be fair, someone said Red Bull came with 5 vans worth of new equipment for the Austrian one just gone. So they really hadn't stopped. They were properly going for it. So I think maybe Mercedes were on, let's just cut our losses. We're not going to waste resources like Red Bull are just for the sake of one world title when we could be good for 10 years. Whilst at the same time, they have since reverted and said we are going to bring some changes and upgrades to the car, because I think you've got to keep the drivers happy. I do think Hamilton. I mean, to be honest, Hamilton still hasn't signed his contract for next year with Mercedes. If they're not going to advance that car, he's like, well, where's the ambition? You think of Michael Jordan. I don't know if you watched that documentary on Netflix when that was out, The Last Dance, but he was like, I'm not, even though it was unlikely they were going to get a good seeding in his first year at the Bulls, it was like he still went out and went for every win, and they managed to get into the playoffs, which I know it sounds really good, but it meant that they missed out on one of those lucrative, they got like a draft lottery, and you have to be one of the teams that misses out to get that. And obviously the ownership was like, well, let's miss out so that we get a good pick and go properly the year after. He's like, no, we go for it now. We want to win now. It doesn't matter if it's just for a low seeding here or there. It's we want to win. And
yeah,
I get that vibe of Hamilton's not going to be there sitting around going, oh, okay, yeah, I'll happily wait for next year. He's only got a few years left. He wants to win now. So if you want to sign Hamilton and you want to show a bit of aggression and a bit of we're going to win it, you got to upgrade this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a little bit of mind games behind what Total Wolf said, I'll be honest. But you know, I'd be very surprised if they did no development for the rest of the season. I think perhaps it'll just be a lot less than it would have been in previous years. I don't know. I mean, just speaking about Mercedes and Red Bull in general, I feel like this weekend is this is the first time where you've kind of looked at it and you've gone, Mercedes really do have no answer to Red Bull's pace. Like in France, okay, I know in the end it was fairly, I say straightforward, as in it ended up being fairly straightforward for Verstappen, but you always got the impression that if Mercedes had perhaps been a little more clinical with their pit stops, they could have prevented it from being that way. Whereas this time around, it was almost as if like it got to a point where I can't remember exactly what the conversation was, but Hamilton was talking to his engineer on the radio, and the engineer said, "Okay, Lewis, we got 8 seconds, 8-second gap," and Lewis was like, basically saying, "Well, like, how am I meant to close that?" And the response was effectively just do the best you can, which is like, I mean, it's never what you want to hear.
Of like, for instance, Giovinazzi being told Daniel Ricciardo's time. It's like, it's absolutely arbitrary, even though it's like, okay, you're next to each other. The gap's too big.
Yeah.
They aren't competing on the same level anymore. Verstappen.
No.
I mean, I know by the end I think he won by like 35 seconds or something, but that was because Hamilton pitted for the fastest lap. But by and large, it was about 9, almost 10 seconds when he did the pit. It was like, it was comprehensive how much better they were. I mean, how much of that is Verstappen driving out of his skin? Because you still got to look at it and say Perez didn't manage to overtake Bottas, but at the same time, he had about a 4-second slower pit stop, which didn't really help situations. But
I mean, if you look at it this way, so you've got Max Verstappen first. Hamilton was 35 seconds behind, but as you said, he pitted, so he probably would have been about 10 seconds behind. Yeah. And then Bottas was 46 seconds behind. So as in, there's still a massive gap between Verstappen and Hamilton, and then Bottas in third. So I think it's probably, I think what you're seeing is, I think right now you've got the best car, and Verstappen just seems very, very comfortable in it. I think it's as simple as that. Hamilton, he's made the odd error here and there, but it just seems like the car just doesn't want to do what he's trying to make it to, if that makes sense.
By and large, Verstappen and Hamilton had the same race. They both pitted pretty much the same lap. They both drove as they drove. I mean, the only sort of alteration in strategy was the fact that Hamilton pressed hard early on to his second stint of
yes, because they thought it might turn into a 2-stop.
But that didn't really materialise into anything. And then it kind of just like, well, Verstappen still had quite a lot of life left because he didn't. But apart from that, they drove the same race, and the Mercedes was 10 seconds slower over the course of the race. So it's like, well, there's no real quick answer for that. The Red Bulls.
No, and I guess that's. I mean, firstly, it's huge because obviously the next race is at the same track, so to a certain extent you expect a similar result. Not exactly the same because of weather and all sorts of variations, but what track you're driving around, if you're driving around the same one, is probably going to have a fairly large influence. And like I said, this is the first weekend of a triple header. So again, the momentum. I think what we're seeing is the first couple of races. I feel like Mercedes managed to do a couple of things to kind of get wins, and Red Bull weren't really maxing out with the package that they had. But I think in these last sort of 2 or 3 races, you're really seeing Red Bull kind of tighten the screw a little bit now.
Mercedes sort of just had... Well, I feel like they're almost on par. Mercedes was a bit savvy on some and beat Red Bull. Red Bull sometimes... I always felt like Red Bull had the faster car, but with certain tracks with the high wind, it seemed like they haven't...
Yes.
Red Bull have gone, okay, we've sorted everything out and we've got a smaller wing. And it was like part of the parcel. It's like we're still quicker with the smaller wing. It's like wind is a non-factor for them anymore, and they've got the quicker car. It does just have that feel of they're really going to walk away with this now. Unless Mercedes do something incredible.
Well, it's a danger, isn't it? It's a danger. It's very much a danger. I feel like right now the only thing that really keeps Mercedes in the battle properly is the fact that they've got Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
As one of their drivers, like you said, as in, Verstappen. Well, just in general, Verstappen and Hamilton were just in a league of their own this weekend. I haven't got all of the stats, but as in, they did say it at one point, and like it was not that far into the race, and like Verstappen was coming up to lap in 5th, and you're like, that's ridiculous. Like they were just so much quicker than everyone, but not just quicker than the other teams, but like their teammates as well. As in, like Verstappen and Hamilton just drove off. Like, it was really.
To be fair, Verstappen was 20 seconds off of lapping Perez. But to be fair to everybody, this is the shorter circuit on the calendar by some distance.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
You know what I mean? What's it, a 1 minute? Well, Hamilton set a fast lap at 1:07, which is about a second.
The average seems to be 108, 109 is in that ballpark, really, isn't it?
So it's not the hardest circuit to lap people on because of the distance. But still, if you're getting within 20 seconds a lap in your teammate, it's looking edgy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just from somebody who's a Lewis Hamilton fan, I think very, very ominous signs from the Red Bull side of things. I think, especially going into the next race, you're probably, as Lewis Hamilton or Valtteri Bottas, you're probably sat there like, right, how do we go about this now then? Like, what can we do to make things happen? But yeah, and I think like it's the first time in a long time as well. I did try and find the stat, but I couldn't find it. They've gone about I think it's 4 races now without a win.
Yeah, I think that's the
Mercedes.
first time in the hybrid era. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So it's been a long time. So obviously Mercedes don't become a bad team overnight, as in they're 7-time constructors champions, but they're really being put to the test at the moment. And I don't know. I find it interesting, like each week they come on the radio and like, not so much this week because I think it was just generally that Red Bull were faster, but as in last week they kind of came on the radio and they were like, oh, sorry, Lewis. And Lewis kind of comes on and goes, oh, yeah, it's all right, guys, on to the next one, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of think, like, how long is it going to be before... Because at the end of the day, like, Hamilton is there to win. For so long now, he's the best drivers end up in the best cars, but for so long he has by far had the best car.
Yeah.
Like, is there going to be a point where he just kind of, not snaps, but as in he's just like, right, no, look, we need to sort this out now.
But that's the thing.
I think it'll be interesting.
I would be surprised if he has to just sort of take those sour apples and just go, everyone's focusing on 2022. I mean, I don't think there's any team who's not looking towards 2022 in a sense. I mean, Haas, for one, they're not even bothering with 2022.
Haas, I was about to say Haas are only looking towards 2022. So I mean, it's interesting.
Smarter. If he wants a chance of winning next year, I think he's going to have to take it on the chin of, you're going to be second this year, unfortunately.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, do you think there should be, I guess not so much in terms of Mercedes and Red Bull, because I think the argument is that they're coming from a much faster starting point, but like teams like Haas, do you think there should be like some sort of regulations when it comes to car development?
Well, how on earth would you enforce that is the issue. It's like the team is purposely being bad, which I know sounds nuts, but it's like,
Yeah.
how could you regulate that? What could you take money away from them? It's like, it's just counterintuitive. You can't really prove that somebody's not trying, even though it's so blatantly obvious.
Could you not say, so like you could say, right, here's your budget for the season, here's the amount of time, because like they do it with the wind tunnel, don't they? Like the team that's furthest up the grid has less time in the wind tunnels for the following pre-season, you know?
Yeah.
Could they not do the similar thing in terms of budget? So it's like a case of, you know, this is how much you've got to spend in this season. What you don't spend, you can't spend next season. As in, what you don't spend, you just don't spend. And then just like put a cap on the amount of time they're allowed to develop.
But I would say
next season's car now.
The sort of caveat to that is they are doing it this season because of a regulation change. What happens next year, for instance? It's like somebody says we're not going. You know, in a sense, it's just a unique circumstance. Like if it happened next year, it's like you're always changing your car to make it better for the year after. You know what I mean? It's just because it's a 1 year thing. How you'd regulate that? Because you could say that money is like no investment or development which they're doing is you can isolate as a 1 year thing. Even any work they're doing on the car this year, whether it's like the rear, you know what I mean, or the rake of the car, it's like, how do you prove that, even though it's like, yeah, it's okay for this year, how do you know it's not going to be great, easily transferable to the next one? So proving what's been used in what year and all that, I think it's just going to be too hard. I like the idea of forcing teams to be better. Whether you said to somebody, go around this circuit 5 times and get the average lap, and then at the end of the season you've got to prove that you've improved that car by at least 4 seconds or for whatever, and say, well, that shows the evidence. I don't know, but you know what I mean. Penalising a team for being bad you know what I mean. It doesn't make sense in the end. I think you always want to try and give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps I agree with what you're saying. However, Haas have been absolutely pitiful this season. I don't think I've ever seen a Formula One team, like even with the regulation changes, you know, as in we've had quite a few regulation changes really in the last couple of, you know, decade or so. But as in, I don't think I've ever seen like a team like so obviously just giving up.
They do have a minimum fastest lap time on every circuit, which a team has to actually get past to be allowed to actually race that weekend. So
perhaps they should make that shorter.
Yeah, maybe, but they are quick enough in a sense. Like I know they were looking at Schumacher in France, I think, when he retired in qualifying, because they wanted to see if any of his practice laps were fast enough to actually get him into the race. I think he had done a couple of qualifying runs, but if you know what I mean, if you don't do anything in the practice and then you retire out of the qualifying, you're not allowed to race because you haven't physically shown that your car is quick enough to be able to compete you. Which sounds strange, but
although
it is
on a serious note, how abysmal is that car going to have to be to not even be able to compete? Like, when you think about it, like when you consider how like average, how bad Haas have been this season. Yeah, perhaps that's a little bit unfair on my part, but anyway, we'll move it on. So yeah, like we said, the Ferraris did well. Sainz managed to climb a few places. Leclerc also managed to climb, having lost a load at the start because of contact. You know, good race for them after what would have been disappointing in France, I think. Also, you know, Daniel Ricciardo. What is going on? Like he's still really struggling, isn't he? Like it
seems like 1 week he's done really well, and then he has another 4 which are rubbish.
Yeah, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Yeah. You know, as in qualified 13th, finished 13th. I mean, like, how do you solve a problem like Danny Rick? I mean, like, the guy is clearly fast, as in we've seen that previously, as in he's won at Monaco many times. Well, has he won at Monaco many times? I don't know. He's won once. Like, he's a quick driver. Yes, he's won there at least once. Yeah. We'll go with that. I just don't know what's going on. As in, like, you would think now, as in we were just saying this before the podcast, where we've just had round 8, you know, so Austria part 2 will be round 9, and then Silverstone's part 10, and at that point you're almost halfway through the season. So how long do you wait before you look at it and go, well, it's not really the car?
Well,
As in like...
He's on a 2-year contract, isn't he? It's not a 1 year.
Well, something like that.
Yeah,
I don't think
it's
so.
It's definitely more than one. That's all we know.
Okay.
But it's a tricky one because at the beginning the excuse was it's a difficult car to learn. But Carlos Sainz didn't have that difficulty, and Carlos Sainz has gone to another team and done well. So has Perez.
Fernando Alonso as well,
Exactly.
out of the sport for 2 years. He's now starting to
the
perform.
sport for the first time, and he's there's lots of change, and he seems to be the only person really having an issue. I mean, he finished 13th this weekend out of 18 finishers, and you consider that 3 of those are Haas and Williams. It's like, well, you only beat 2 people, which it doesn't bode well. Which the equivalent of you has finished 5th place and you're 13th. It's like the whole season's not been great for him. So I get what you mean. How you got to give him the benefit of the doubt, though. As you were saying, it's Daniel Ricciardo. He is. I mean, we were talking pre-season that if this McLaren is relatively close and competitive to the Red Bulls and Mercedes, that they could potentially sneak a couple of wins, but.
Yeah,
and he is the sort of championship caliber driver that some of these teams may even want. So he's you obviously give him all the time he wants, but is he doing as badly as Sebastian Vettel was doing for Ferrari though? Because arguably the Ferrari was a dog last year, and he was still at least finishing close to the top 10, but it looked embarrassing because of where he dropped from. Whilst if you look at it on the flip side, this year the McLaren's much better in comparison to the other teams than what the Ferrari was last year, but still Daniel's just as low, if not lower, than what Vettel was doing last year. So it's what I mean. It's a tough one.
But I mean, it's also interesting as well because and you've said this already, but as in, it's not just the fact that Ricciardo is struggling; it's the fact that Lando Norris seems to be doing like really well. As in, he finished 5th. Well, he qualified 3rd. Was it? Was it 3rd?
Because Norris, qualified 3rd, finished 5th. Ignore this.
So he finished 5th, which is a good result considering that one of the cars behind him was Bottas, who on time was quicker, but obviously had a 3-place grid penalty for doing donuts, and Sergio Perez. So as in realistically, you're always expecting the top 4 cars to be the Red Bulls and the Mercedes, but do you think there's perhaps an element that like Lando Norris has been there? Is this his 3rd season? 3rd? 2nd?
Probably, yeah.
I can't remember.
It's definitely not 2nd. It's definitely at least 3rd.
Yes.
I was thinking, is it 4? But I guess it's 3rd if we're going to go on the average of what we're thinking.
Yeah. It's around 3 seasons now. Obviously, he's had plenty of time to get used to the car. Is there perhaps an element, do you think, that McLaren make the car to perhaps cater to his needs a little bit more?
I feel
like that's a bit too speculative.
I feel like that narrative has stemmed from years of Verstappen just absolutely driving the socks off of that Red Bull. If Verstappen doesn't dominate in the Red Bull as much as he does compared to his teammates, no one's having the conversation about cars being designed for certain drivers. I know obviously you design cars roughly, but there's only so much you can do to cater a car to a driver. By and large, sort of Hamilton and whatever teammate he's had, it's only been a little bit. It's perhaps exemplified a bit because Bottas is not really in the same conversation as good a driver as Hamilton. But now you're seeing guys like Perez who aren't perhaps qualifying speed as fast as Verstappen, because Perez is a guy who's just good at maintaining his tyres, but good enough on a race day in a sense to at least be competitive with, maybe not this weekend. I feel like that's where the narrative has come from. By and large, I just think Lando Norris is stepped up to a level where he is in the conversation as probably the 3rd best driver on the grid, in that conversation with the Leclercs, the Gaslys, and that's probably about it.
Wow, that's a statement.
I don't think it's that outlandish. He has been, by and large, the only guy who's actually been able to compete with Hamilton on a couple of laps. We saw that in...
yes, fair point.
No, it's not Portimao, was it?
It was Portugal, wasn't it?
Portugal, yeah.
I know, it was Imola. It was Imola, wasn't it?
There, then.
Yeah. There. It was there.
Yeah. like, you know what I mean? Hamilton got past all of the other drivers first attempt, and then it gets to Norris, and he's the only guy who can figure out a way of stopping Hamilton. And he took him 4 or 5 laps. I know, obviously, you still go, well, he overtook him, but it's nobody else drove their car well enough to keep Hamilton behind for as long as he did. So, you know, by and large, it shows he's probably one of the few who could.
Yeah, and I mean, you could also argue that, you know, last season Carlos Sainz was equally as competitive as Lando Norris in the same car, so it can't be that drastically different this season, really, can it? Which unfortunately means that it kind of points only to one thing, and that's that Danny Rick is just generally struggling at the moment. Yeah.
Well, what do you make of George Russell this weekend? Because obviously he had a particularly good qualifying, he had a pretty decent race, and then he just
unfortunate
went his car.
So unfortunate, as in, like, I saw something the other day, and it was a meme, and it was George Russell when he pops up on TV, and then Crofty, and then in quotes it was Mr. Saturday, because it's so true. Like every single, that's all he says about George Russell. Oh, Mr. Saturday. But no, yeah, George Russell had a cracking weekend. He qualified 11th, just. Very, very unfortunate not to get 10th.
I think he was 800ths of a second off.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Very, very close.
Very close, yeah. I mean, considering the car he's in, as in, that's no mean feat at all. I mean, so horrendously unlucky on race day.
Do you think he can replicate that this weekend? By and large, same track. No one's really getting that big of upgrade because everyone's focusing to next year. Do you think he can possibly even get into the top 10? Or was he just
I think
victim of good circumstance?
I think it'll depend on what the tyre compounds are, in all honesty.
Fair enough.
Because there seems to be such a massive variation this season between which cars can make the tyres work well. So even though the Williams clearly in qualifying managed to do okay this time around, if the tyre compounds change. I mean, the thing is that Williams in general this season, like when you look at how they've been over the past couple of seasons, they've made like good steps forward, as in, we're at the point now where getting George Russell into Q2 is not that surprising anymore, whereas, 2 or 3 seasons ago, like, if Williams even got to qualifying, you'd be like, "Whoa, so impressive!"
Yeah. But yeah, the fact that they are conversation
we weren't bottom
start is insane. Let's just quickly taking a glance at everybody's fastest laps for the race, just because obviously you get guys like Tsunoda or Schumacher. I mean, less so in that extent, but guys who were still learning the circuit by and large. And I wondered if they were getting quicker throughout the weekend, but they had some pretty competitive times. I mean, more so looking at Tsunoda, I haven't got like a ranking of where they finished in terms of fastest laps for the race, but he had a 109.6, which would have put him ahead of Alonso and Stroll. Ahead of Vettel, not ahead of Ricciardo. So you know what I mean? He got some competitive times from Tsunoda. Perhaps this weekend he stamps his authority and gets into the top 10, so it perhaps could be a little bit harder for Russell, but by and large, a phenomenal weekend for the young Brit who should really be in the Mercedes.
Well, do you know what? Like, I was saying this to somebody the other day. I don't know whether you'll be surprised to hear this or not, but I've come to the conclusion that I think Bottas will go at the end of the season now.
Oh, yeah, I don't think that's even a secret anymore. I think...
but it's up until now... No, well, up until now, I've defended him, but... and this is going off on a little bit of a tangent, but it was in France, and it was when... So basically, Red Bull pitted the second time. Mercedes basically missed a trick, didn't they? So, their drivers were telling them, this is going to be a two-stop race, and Mercedes effectively kind of ummed and ahed a little bit. Oh, don't know. And then Red Bull just went, right, we're doing a two-stop. And then Mercedes were like, oh, pants. Either we've got to do the same as them now and be behind, or we've just got to try and eke it out as long as possible, which is what they did, and hope for the best, and it didn't work out. And then, during that, the final stages, Valtteri Bottas comes on the on the radio and F's and blinds a little bit and says, "Why didn't you listen to us?" kind of thing. And he was right. So, like, what he's saying is like absolutely spot on. And again, like Bottas had been a little bit unfortunate throughout the weekend, as in like P1 and P2. I think he was quicker than Hamilton in like all of the sessions, and then in the one where it really mattered, he was slower. So standard Bottas. But then, so he has this outburst, and then Verstappen is catching, and you know Verstappen's going to overtake him. He's on new tyres, and he's just generally faster around that circuit anyway. And you were kind of there like, if Bottas can just hold up Verstappen, even if it's for like a couple of corners, like that can make a big difference because of the straights. You know, you're like, oh, you know, just hold him up a little bit, Valtteri. And you know, the first point where Verstappen is like in an overtaking position, what does Valtteri do? Get to the chicane. Oh yeah, it just runs deep. And you're like, oh, for goodness sake! Like when it really comes down to it, Bottas just doesn't deliver, and I think that's and I think now that Mercedes haven't got by far the quickest car, you know, as in like Hamilton finishing second was still like a good 10-15 seconds, you know, ahead of Bottas. Like that's like, and having pitted twice as well, as in like in the same car. And you know, there was this whole thing in France, wasn't there? Oh, chassis change. Clearly, it doesn't make any difference.
Yeah,
that was all just
can mug Bottas in his sleep on the circuit.
Yeah, it was all gas, wasn't it? So I feel like it's got to the point now where I think if Mercedes swapped for George Russell, I'd kind of be like, yeah, I'd back that kind of thing. You know,
I still think they should do it mid-season. I'm still of that opinion. I don't think Bottas has the minerals to beat Perez every race, and I think Russell might have a chance of doing it.
Here's the question, right? Going off on that briefly. If George Russell goes to Mercedes, does Valtteri Bottas go to Williams, or does he end up without a seat?
It's a good question to have. I think the way the grid is...
Obviously, this is hypothetical, yeah. Obviously.
The way the grid is set up, firstly, I don't think he goes to Williams. I don't think Williams are that sort of team. Firstly, they always have one driver who is paying for their seats because that's the only way you can raise money at Williams.
Yeah.
Same for Haas, you know what I mean? It's nothing to be ashamed of. It is what it is. It's a fact of the business. And the second one, they try and have someone competitive in it. And I don't think... Well, it's either competitive or it's a promising youngster. So you see guys like AlphaTauri in an instance. Sonoda's not paying for his seats, but no, he is a very talented youngster. So yeah. That's I don't think they could have imagined they were going to be this quick. So I think that's a bit of a shock to the books. But in terms of looking at the rest of the grid, McLaren are set for 2 years at least, with two of probably the most promising double lineup outside of Red Bull, really, at the present time. Ferrari. Again, Leclerc's on the longest contract in Ferrari history and looks like probably the third best driver on the grid, one of. And Carlos Sainz he's kind of there, but he hasn't got that killer instinct, and that's the only thing lacking from Carlos Sainz. Well,
the thing with Carlos Sainz, I think he's been a bit of a masterstroke at Ferrari, to be honest, because he's so consistent.
Yeah, that's consistent and stable and just nothing. Yeah. He doesn't cause waves, just a calm seat. Aston Martin, perhaps. Again, it depends how long they're willing to sit on Lance Stroll, because Lance Stroll will never be a top driver. Lance Stroll will forever just be a guy who's he's bought the team. You can't buy a seat. He bought the entire team, and he's quick enough to sort of get into that Q2 regularly, and that's it. That's all he'll ever amount to.
Yeah.
I think the first sort of if you're looking for openings that Bottas could potentially nab. Depends if Alonso wants to stay at Alpine, because I'm sure Alpine will keep him for as long as they can have him. I feel like Aston Martin may move on from Vettel if Vettel's sort of the lucrative nature of having him in terms of advertising, if that dissipates, then Vettel's going to leave. Alfa Romeo, same with Kimi Räikkönen, but I feel like Kimi Räikkönen is driving the socks off of that car as well. So until somebody is underperforming, i.e. a Daniel Ricciardo, and though is sort of in that older generation of drivers who don't have so much promise ahead of them, I don't feel like there's any realistic chance of him getting a seat. Unless say, for instance, a Haas is properly brutal and says Mick Schumacher's not up to it, I don't think there's a seat. Or Alfa Romeo with Giovinazzi. I feel like Schumacher or Giovinazzi, the only 2 seats, or Vettel, are the only 3 seats that I could see him possibly getting into. And yeah, I think that's the fact of the nature of.
Can you imagine that though? Like Valtteri Bottas, who's been racing for 7-time constructors world champions, ends up without a seat.
To be honest, though, I don't think
almost
it's
unheard
insane.
of, isn't it?
I don't think it's insane.
No?
But I think you look at a guy like Perez. Now, if you think if he's not a Red Bull, he probably doesn't get a seat. But I think it's just because seats get filled. There's too many good drivers, in a sense, for the number of seats.
Yeah.
And Giovinazzi and sort of the Mazepins of the world. It just is what it is. There's only so many seats, and there's so many drivers. You look at a guy like Hulkenberg. You could arguably say he's better than some of the guys on the grid, but everyone's willing to take a chance. Since Verstappen and Norris have done so well coming into the sport, I think everybody's willing to take a chance on a youngster. So, in a sense, it's not just the drivers that are there, it's the ones coming through. These old guard, they're going to, especially the ones which show no promise towards winning anything. I mean, Bottas has had his chance. If he's not going to win it now, he's never going to win it. So I think that's the end of the road for him.
I mean, it's like when you think about like just some of Bottas's stats, like 41 front row starts, 5 wins from pole, 60 podiums, 122 points finishes. Bear in mind he's entered 165, so he's only 40 races roughly where he's not finished, and when you consider like a lot of those would be retirement, etc. 17 fastest laps. It was in like he's not a bad driver. Like I don't know.
He's not a bad driver, but the only reason Vettel, Raikkonen, and Alonso have seats is because they're former world champions. Bottas isn't a former world champion, so he's not going to get a seat on that basis.
That's true. But this is another one. How old do you think Bottas is?
31.
What a guess! He is 31. He'll be 30. He'll be 32 in August.
Oh, there we go.
It just caught me off guard. Sorry, I don't know why. I thought he was younger than that. Yeah.
No. I feel like he's had.
There we are.
You think though, how long has he been at Mercedes? And before that, he was at
That's
Williams.
true. Yeah.
He's been in the game a long time.
I do still feel a bit sorry for Valtteri though.
It's the same reason Hulkenberg hasn't got a seat, because he's never done anything. He hasn't even got a podium. So you know what I mean. If you haven't got the mustard when it counts, you're not going to get anything. The reason Perez has a seat right now is because he's gone out and won a race. He won 2 races.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, there we go. Perez clearly has something. Bottas can't even win in a Mercedes. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on.
It's true. I'm just looking through the points we've got. Yeah, no. Poor old Valtteri. We love you really, Valtteri.
Yeah. Great.
Just not in Formula 1 car.
That's sort of all of our points, actually. For this,
that's the main points, yeah. It wasn't the most exciting race. Should we move on to our...
what are you
go on.
looking forward to in Austria for the second time round?
That's a good question.
What's going to be sort of hopes which you have for that race to be a good one? What needs to happen?
Weather.
To be better? Yeah, it needs to rain.
Tropical storm. No, look, I'm not one of those people who... And perhaps I'm sure I'm in a minority with this, but like quite often, like it'll be like, "Ooh, there's rain forecast," and everyone's like, "Yay, rain!" I'm like, "Oh, really?" I don't like the rain. I just think it makes it slower. I just see it as like I don't know.
I find it's a test of driver ability. If in a sense, you can become very comfortable in Formula 1, driving in the dry all the time, going to these hot destinations like Dubai and Bahrain, where you know it's going to be dry. Chuck in the rain. Really challenge some people and say, yeah, try and drive now. You know what I mean? There's going to be a baptism of fire if it rains for guys like Schumacher and Tsunoda. They're not used to the beasts that these cars are in wet circumstances. They're going to be skidding all over the place. It's going to be beautiful to watch.
I mean, the weather's a big factor, like we said with the tyres. Let's have a look at that, actually. Let's see what the compounds they're going to be using.
I imagine it'll be on the softer side to encourage more... pit stops, but to be fair, the guy survived on medium hard strategies this weekend, so I can't.
Yeah.
If it goes soft, all that's going to happen really is sort of the guys from Norris down to about 10th are going to be a little bit stuck because they're all going to start on the softs and not survive.
Let's have a look. Red Bull Ring hosts the next 2 rounds.
The Pirelli Twitter page always have them.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, they always announce them each week with a lovely little statistician element to it. Which...
Nope, not Pirelli. Pirelli Motorsport. Here we go.
Here we go.
For round 2, right, here we go. So they've gone for the C3, C4, C5.
So those
they're the
3 hardest or 3 softest?
They'll be the 3 softest, I'd imagine. What do they have?
They had the 3
so
middle
this weekend,
ones. They had the bang on in the
yeah,
middle.
so they've gone softer. They've gone 1 set softer.
Oh, okay. Just the one.
So effective. So this weekend they had 2, 3, 4,
okay.
and
this
coming weekend they've got 3, 4, 5. Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, it should encourage. Well, it should have more things to think about with the tyres. I mean, I know a few guys were struggling a little bit, but yeah, it could be a 2-stopper then this week. I mean, they were almost on a 2-stopper
maybe
last weekend.
Yeah, that's a good point. It'll be interesting to see how they play it. That could be a definite factor. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what the times are like, because, you know, like we said last year, they had I think the first race at the Red Bull Ring was wet. The second one was dry. So obviously, well, sorry, when I say wet and dry, the qualifying was wet, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I can't remember whether the race was wet. But yeah, so there was variation in the weather between the weekends. If it was dry again, I'd be interested to see whether they go faster, just purely on the basis of, like,
they'll have their setups, won't they? They'll know what they're doing.
Well, yeah,
and affecting on-track performance.
And just in terms of racecraft as well, as in, like, you know, like they always say in commentary, don't they, how, like, you do a warm-up lap, and then depending on what happens there, you know, they then, like, really push on the next one. But obviously they've done, like, a full race, qualifying, all of the practice, they've already done that once, and only last week. So does that then mean they're going to push that a little bit harder? Could we be in for some more collisions and crashes and, you know, speculation, all that?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, there's a bit of drama, but I think as long as everyone survives the first lap this time, I think we're going to have a better race instantly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd be a change of strategies. Some cars, I mean, what we're finding more this year than we did last year, I feel, is certain cars are overheating the tyres too much just by the way they're designed, and tyres are dying quicker. So the fact that that's an element, I think Ferrari are having a little bit of an issue with that. So, you know, having those sort of elements in the races is already something which is adding a flavour, and with people having to push a little bit harder with the likes of Gasly and Leclerc not instantly being out of the race or at the back of the race, I think immediately it's going to become a more entertaining race at the very least. So, yeah, hopes are up for Austria.
Fair enough. Should we move on to our predictions?
Yeah, let's do so.
Let's do that.
So, going in, well, we didn't do them for Styria, but we are doing them for Austria. From our predictions way back in France, I correctly guessed first, second, and third for that in the correct order, so I got 9 points. You got 2 of the correct people, but none in the right positions. You got 2. I guessed Verstappen as pole, and he got it. You guessed Bottas. I guessed Perez for the overtakes. He got just the 1, but Vettel got 3, so you got more points than me there. And our new scores are I'm on 26 and you're on 22. So going ahead of that and into predictions for the sort of second Austria, what's your top 3?
Verstappen, Hamilton, Perez. And my predictions, I think I can't see...
Oh no, it wasn't duplicate.
Sorry?
Bottas got 3rd, didn't he? I was going to say duplicate, but it
yes. I just think Verstappen was looking too far ahead for Mercedes to even... You know, like, if you think about it logically, even if they gain 5 seconds, on paper that still leaves them 5 seconds behind where Red Bull were. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
I'm going to go for Verstappen, Perez, Hamilton. Almost the same as you, but I'm saying Perez gets 2nd. I just think he's used to the lap now. I think he might have a better qualifying this time, so he won't be so far behind at the beginning. That's my hope, anyway. Who you go for pole?
I'm going to say Perez.
I'm going to go for Verstappen. I think it's going to be duplicate this weekend.
Yeah.
And what about for the overtakes?
I'm going to say Yuki Tsunoda.
Really? He had
Yeah, I don't know. Just
one overtake
fancy him,
this
you know?
weekend, but to be fair, he raced well and he's probably going to get quicker. I've gone for Leclerc. He went so far back and he had so many overtakes. I think he's used to it. He knows what he's doing. I'm hoping he gets more.
Yeah, it's true. Build a bit of confidence going into this coming race. So yeah, we'll see what happens with the scores on the doors after that race. And I think that brings us to the end of the podcast, doesn't it?
That it does.
Slightly shorter one because a bit more of a discursive one I think this week rather than just looking directly at what happened in the race. Hopefully this race coming this weekend will have some rain or tyres going funny or something like that we can delve into. But yeah, if you're listening on YouTube or Spotify, why not give us a follow or subscribe if you're on YouTube, obviously. We're also on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Anchor,
Spotify?
I
don't know if you said that. You might have said that.
I think I might have said Spotify with YouTube. But yeah, if you're listening on any of those, thank you very much. Jack, pleasure as always.
Thank you.
And we shall speak to you all soon.